Okay, so the next one is chapter 5, and we are finding overhead and figuring out how we're going to allocate that. So the first exercise I'm going to do is cornerstone exercise 5-22, the predetermined overhead rate and overhead application. So on this one, we have overhead costs or estimated overhead costs of 416,000 and direct labor of 520,000. So we are using a normal costing system and we are applying overhead on the basis of direct labor. What we want to do in this case is we want to take the entire year's worth of overhead or estimated overhead and divide it by the estimated direct labor, since that's our cost driver. So I'm going to take 416,000 and I'm just going to divide it by 520,000. Okay, so 0.8. So what that means is that for every dollar of direct labor that or every hour of direct labor that we incur, or its cost, right? Direct labor hour cost, every dollar that we incur, we are also incurring 80 cents of overhead. So when we're applying this, which is the second part of this, we're going to take our actual overhead for December of 43,700 and we're going to multiply it by 0.8. So we incurred $43,700 in direct labor costs. We also incurred $34,960 in overhead because of that. So the next one, which is 5-23, at the end of the year, we have overhead of 423,600, and then we have direct labor costs of 532,000. Okay. So we use normal costing and apply overhead rate of 80% of direct labor. At the end of the year, we have cost of goods sold. So let's see what our actual overhead versus our applied overhead was going to be. So in this case, our actual overhead was 423,000. Our applied was 425,600, and I got that by, I'll do applied overhead, and that was by our 532,000 hours or dollars of direct labor cost times 0.8. Okay, so that's what we applied, not applies, applied. And our actual was 423,600. So our difference was $2,000, which that's pretty good. We estimated $2,000 over our actual overhead. So if cost of goods sold, which is an expense, was 1,890,000, we get to actually deduct this under applied amount. So I'm going to go ahead and just subtract that out. So I'm going to say less the applied overhead. So our new cost of goods sold is 1,888,000. All right, so let's take a look at the next one, which is 24, and this is when we have more than one department. So we have a cutting and we have a sewing department, and overhead is applied using different cost drivers, different things. So overhead in the cutting department is using direct labor hours. Overhead in the sewing department is using, in the cutting department is machine, and then sewing is direct labor hours. So let me go ahead and figure out what our overhead application rates are going to be. So we have cutting, and that is going to be, again, machine hours. Sorry about that. So we're going to have 240,000 of total overhead for that, and I'm going to divide that by 150,000 machine hours. Okay. So that's going to give me a total of $1.60 per machine hour. And then for sewing, I'm going to take my 350 in total overhead for sewing, 350,000. And I'm going to go ahead and divide that by 100,000 in my direct labor hours. So that's only 350. Oops, I have an extra 0 in there. I'm sorry. So that is 350 in direct and overhead based on direct labor hours. The next part of this is to go ahead and apply your rates, your overhead rates that you just calculated, to your cost drivers. So for example, for sewing, well, let's do cutting first. So we've got, since I've got that up here first, so we've got cutting. So we are basing our cutting on machine hours, and we had 13,640 machine hours. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to multiply my machine hours times my overhead rate. So I've got 21,824. And then for sewing, I am going to go ahead and take my total direct labor hours, which is 8,600, and I'm going to multiply that by my overhead rate. And I've got 30,100 here. So then the last part is to actually just compare our applied here to our actual. So let's take a look at cutting. Our actual, it said, was 20,610, and we estimated it to be 21,824. For our sewing, we had an estimate or an actual of 35,750, and then we had an estimate of 30,100. So that's our difference. And there's our difference. So for the cutting, we over-applied, and then for our sewing, we under-applied.